All right, Smooth 98.1 FM, love music, love life. It is time for the marketplace.
Yes, it is. And joining us, you may know him from the morning Business Express show, but we brought him to the evening. We've got
right.
Kelvin Emmanuel, the CEO of Hills Ltd. Welcome, Kelvin. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Yeah. All right. Oh, by the way, people, we are streaming live already up on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. Go over there and you can watch what happens and put the faces to the voices of the marketplace. Mm-hmm. You can also join the conversation up on that platform by just leaving your comments on the live chat. We'll be able to read it out over the course of the next half hour. You can also send WhatsApp messages for conversational purposes only to 0809 40981, and you can use the hashtag marketplace981 up on Twitter.
That's right. So today, like I said, it's going to be a very, very interesting conversation, a fantastic one. And let's just get right into the nitty-gritty of why we're here today, more or less. We're looking at insecurity and the Nigerian economy. And of course, that's like the most reasonable place to start from at this point in time, bearing in mind recent developments. And Kelvin, let's start from here. With the kidnapping at the Edo train station, what impact would it have on sectors like tourism, for example?
Well, it's not only tourism it will have; it's also real business, like real investments. And the first thing that came to my mind when I heard about Edo was the report recently that was released by Okumu Oil that said that 5 people have been killed who are staffs of Okumu Oil over the last couple of years. Yes, because they own the largest palm plantation in Edo State. Okay, Okumu Oil, for context, is owned by Socfina. Socfina is a Belgian company that is incorporated in Luxembourg. They own about 83% of Okumu Oil, as listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So you can imagine the effects of insecurity on business and investments. You also have a Dangote cement plant in Edo State and quite a number of companies there. So, the fear, going back to what happened between Abuja Kaduna train station that lasted several months before the last batch of abductees were released by the kidnappers. It's crippling, it's terrifying, and it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign considering that foreign direct investments dropped from $8.84 billion in 2011 to $1.5 billion in 2023. It's a very terrifying sign. It's not a good sign for foreign investors at all.
Now, when you talk about investment, what about investment and money going into the railway sector as well? Because we need money to build infrastructure. Sure. And if we're looking at trying to get more cars off the road and more people on the trains, especially, let's say, going from commuter towns and trying to build up commuter towns in Nigeria, aren't we going to need to rely on the railways? And if we see more attacks like this, oh, please, I pray we don't.
Let's not see
let's not see any more attacks like this. But having to entertain the possibility, what does that do for investments into that kind of infrastructure?
To be honest with you, I don't agree that the federal government should be in charge of the train buses. I think that the only business the federal government has is with building the rail lines. The actual purchase of the train buses and management, for example, if you look at the recent Lamata project in Lagos with the monorail that is going to be fully commissioned later in the year, second quarter, I think. I don't think that the federal government should be NRC, Nigerian, they should be responsible for managing train. But there's a lot of racketeering with ticketing for trains in Nigeria. Lagos Ibadan train station, Abuja Kaduna train station, and the other standard gauges you have. I think the federal government needs to use infrastructure cooperation and private-public sector partnership, PPP, to build standard gauge rail lines from all the way from Port Harcourt to the southwest. You need to connect the southeast and the south-south to the southwest, as well as the south-south to the northwest, right? The government should concern itself with building infrastructure and then have companies get concessions and then have them operate. And then you can have security agencies providing intelligence and enforcement services for them to ensure that the kind of attacks you've been having where terrorists take advantage of soft targets to inflict fear into the people does not repeat itself. I mean, Kaduna and now those states, you and I don't know where next it's going to be. So I don't think that the government should be responsible for managing train buses. That should be the exclusive preserve. And what's interesting is, if you consider that the price of diesel has gone up by about 300% in the last 9 months because of Russia and Ukraine, and you see that the NRC, their cost to income in terms of the cost of diesel for managing these train buses has gone up significantly because of this thing. It shows you why those train buses, the engines need to be changed from diesel engines into natural gas, into compressed natural gas, CNG. And
by the way, I still remember that when it came to budgeting issues that they talked about, the NRC had talked about the fact that they only had a specific amount set aside for diesel, despite the huge increases that we had seen, which also went some way to impacting services. Just putting that out there.
Yes. So the only way you can have people thinking about cutting costs and not using it as a vehicle to make monies for certain individuals in the system is when you have a company. If you have a company running it, they'll always want to cut costs because they want to provide maximum value for their shareholders and investors. But if you have civil servants running the show, you and I know what it's going to be: racketeering. So for efficiency and for profit making and for them to be able to pay the loans that they've incurred in bringing that infrastructure into reality, you need private sector participation and concession agreements through PPP arrangements. That's how I think it's going to be successful and it's going to work going forward.
All right. You spoke earlier about this attacks and the infliction of fear in the minds of people, in the minds of probable commuters and all that. Now, what impact is this going to have on the transportation sector in the country and the rail sector specifically? Looking at what's happened now.
So the immediate impact you see is that cost of insurance goes up, both for logistics and passenger transportation. Cost of insurance goes up. The travel transportation companies for passengers have increased their fares. If you notice very well, they've increased it by around 250% over the last 12 months, apart from the price of gas, fuel and diesel and the likes. Also, the cost of goods in transit, GIT insurance, goes up, especially after the Abuja-Kaduna train attacks. And you notice that has a serious implication on the economy, because the two major vehicles through which you calculate your cost price index or your inflation is energy and food. So when you look at the transportation of food and energy around Nigeria, you consider the fact that, for example, in Lagos, PMS price might be somewhere around 195 or 200 naira per liter, just for example. And then somewhere like Uyo, for example, you can buy a liter of PMS at 270 naira. In Bayelsa, you can buy it at 500 naira. So you can see the cost of transportation and how insurance for transporting these goods, apart from diesel, factors into the mix. So the immediate impact is that the companies will have to pay a higher premium to ensure their loss in case there is any accident or any disaster on their way. That's one immediate impact you see in transportation sector.
All right, and very quickly, what do you think the attacks that we've seen from March 28th of last year and this attack on Saturday, what do you think it does to the perception of Nigeria as a place for investment purposes? Does it give us a safe, how safe does it make Nigeria seem as an investment destination?
It doesn't. And the reason is because, the interesting thing is that when you want to measure impact, you measure impact in figures. Look at the FDI numbers. The FDI numbers are strength. Look at the FDI numbers from 2011 to 2015, it dropped into about $2.3 billion and it dropped into $1.5 billion. Look at the FDI numbers. It's very obvious. Now, apart from the fact that the major reason why foreign investors are not bringing in their money is the spread between the official and parallel market rates that has made them to be unable to price the risk of capital and profit repatriation from Nigeria. Yes. And a classic example of that is the whole fiasco you have with the airlines, international airlines. CBN said they provided like a $265 million airline intervention fund, but the airline said they only got $125 million from it. And I can tell you categorically that the real reason why the UAE banned Nigerians from tourist visas from coming into the UAE, it has nothing to do with, oh, Nigerians are constituting a nuisance in the UAE. It has nothing to do with that. I can tell you categorically that the number one reason why they banned it was actually a retaliation for Emirates Airlines money is being stuck in Nigeria as we speak. And today you have about $760 million stock for several international airlines. This happened in Venezuela many years ago. You know, they didn't get airlines in Venezuela. International airlines had about $3.6 billion stock. You know,
what? Whoa!
Yes.
We're not there yet. We're
not there yet. But in Nigeria, it's $765 million stock. And
yeah, we don't want to get
UAE government banned Nigerians from coming into the country for visas. They even jailed a woman, an innocent woman.
That was basically an eye for an eye kind of situation.
It was an eye for an eye kind of situation. And it has everything to do with the fact that, look, international companies are pricing the risk for holding investments in Nigeria. And if they see that the risk of currency devaluation and depreciation is higher than their internal rate of return, they just will not bring their capital into Nigeria. It's just the way it is.
All right. Well, you've really painted a picture here for us, Kelvin.
Those numbers are just ringing in my head right now.
All right. Okay. And the last thing I suppose is I feel like we're in a catch-22 situation or a chicken and egg and whatever happens in between stage cycle, because it feels like we had this conversation a lot about poverty and insecurity, but which comes first or which needs to be tackled first? Because is it that we'll never be able to get rid of insecurity until we improve the economy? But then how do we improve the economy if we still have insecurity?
It's a vicious cycle.
Look, the budget for education in 2023 appropriation act is 8.2%, which is like an improvement from like 5.7 or 5.4%, if I'm not mistaken, in 2022.
But is that enough?
It's not enough because it falls below the UNESCO standard of 15% of budget for, 15% to the total. I always say this. The Nigerian armed forces is stretched, and what they do is kinetic. What they do, I say, is cure. There's prevention. The usual adage that says, or the usual saying that goes, prevention is better than cure. Mm-hmm. It's better to prevent the crime than to cure the crime. Okay? So you can see that there is a link between illiteracy, low focus on education. You can see that there's a link between underemployment, yes, and insecurity in Nigeria. The lower you go with insecurity, education, literacy, especially in the north, central, west, and east. Yeah, the lower you go with it, the higher you go with the level of stability and security you see in the system. So in my opinion, I think it's important for the government to realize that there are two primary sectors. Whoever the next president is going to be, I don't know who the next president is going to be. There are two primary sectors to focus on: education and healthcare. If you focus on education, you can get Nigeria into the fourth industrial revolution. If you can create broadband access around the country, change the curriculum, impute technology, make education compulsory, emphasize it. You can change the structure of education for tertiary institutions, give them financial autonomy, change the model for funding for higher institutions, and ensure that Nigerians are not left to chance. Yeah, you see that insecurity data drop, and you see the fault lines begin to heal again. Look, Nigeria is in a very bad position. Yeah, if the per capita for the debts that Nigeria owes today is 368,000 naira. Yes, and it's unfortunate that of all the debt that Buhari has accumulated from 12.2 trillion to 77 trillion naira by the middle of this year, there has not been any emphasis on education and healthcare. It's unfortunate.
So you're saying, yeah, we can track it. All right, so we need to take a quick break, but when we get back, let's shift the conversation over to the redesigned narratives. Kelvin, before we go on the break, have you managed to get your hands on some? I got my hands on one by mistake because I've been trying. That's all I can say. It was like serendipity. I've been trying and trying and trying to get my hands on one. Finally got my hands on one, and so quickly, like Tash does, it flowed out of my hands and into someone else's pockets. Yeah, because I managed to finally cite one. So
I haven't cited it.
you haven't seen. That's the thing. A lot of people I know haven't seen it.
I've seen it
It's
twice.
like waiting for the moon.
I mean,
just twice.
It's like these guys are ghost notes. I thought we only had ghost workers. We'll take that break and then we'll be right back. It's the marketplace on Smooth Drive.
Second time was today.
I haven't seen one. I mean, I saw one.
I saw the 500 naira this afternoon. I was like, what is this?
So I saw the one, I actually felt the 1,000 naira note, and it is very, very big.
It looks horrible.
It's very big. But, you know, it's money. It doesn't need to look good. It just needs to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, but
have advanced security features. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, exactly.
Fingers crossed, man. Have advanced security features and not turn up as OMBs, but it's already broken one of those. So, because they have them, they're distributing them at OMBs, but I thought that was part of what we were not supposed to have happen.
Exactly. There's a law against that.
Well,
here we are.
Well, that's all I'm going to say. All right, we will be back in 26 seconds. All right, let's have a look. Hashtag marketplace. All right, YouTube viewers, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, reactions, go ahead and leave your comments, say something. Let us hear you. Whilst I check Twitter.
All right, welcome back. It's still the marketplace on the Smooth Drive on Smooth 98.1 FM. We've been talking with Kelvin Emmanuel, and we've been talking about the recent insecurity issues in Nigeria. Of course, the recent attack on the train in Edo State, and people were kidnapped. So we've been talking about the effects of the insecurity, and of course, as always, charting way forward. But before the break, we said we're going to delve from that into some actual money matters, and talking about money matters.
And speaking about talking, by the way, use the hashtag marketplace981 on Twitter to get your thoughts into the right place, and send WhatsApp messages to 0809 440 981.
That's right. All right, now, Kelvin, the CBN has said the new notes will only be available via ATMs, which I haven't actually seen yet. Just putting it out there. What do you think of this, and what are the implications?
I remember when this policy was announced last year, me and Sope, we spoke about it. I actually think that this is just an example of the fact that the policy is a failure. I don't think it will work because, there was a whole drive to get people to come deposit their cash into the system, and that the CBN promised that from 15th of December last year, they were going to start, issuing the new notes into circulation. And here we are on the 9th of January, 2023, and you and I have been unable to cite it. Sope is the only lucky of the three of us that has been able to.
I've seen it actually.
Okay.
Which one did you see? I saw blue 1,000 naira.
Yeah, I saw 1,000. I saw 500.
Oh, wow.
The second time today actually.
Wow.
Was the second time I saw it.
Huh? Yes. So, the whole plan of the central bank to use this as a means to mop up cash into the system and reduce the level of cash supply because of the violation of ways and means lending, the central bank pumped 24.5 trillion naira into the economy in violation of Section 38 of the CBN Act, So redesign was like an opportunity for them to bring cash back and reduce cash supply and go digital and electronic. But the reason why I've always held that policy will fail, and I think it will fail, is because the internet penetration rate in Nigeria is between 38 and 45%. Lagos has the highest number of BTS, base transceiver stations in Nigeria. It has about 15% of about 42,000 BTS in Nigeria. So you have something around Yes, you have something around 1.6 BTS per square kilometers. Lagos, by the way, has a land square kilometer base of 30,577. Yeah. If you go to states outside Lagos in the northeast, northwest, you have states where there are only 400. Lagos has 6,000. Yeah. You have
Some
states
states
where
only
there are
400.
400. There are states where you drive 20 kilometers and you won't find network. So the question I always have for the CBN is, how do you want to implement banking and digital banking when even people who live in the cities have issues with error, transaction error, and monies that are not reverted for weeks and months? How do you want to implement it? The economy is still very cash-based because 55% of your population is unbanked. So this is a gradual process, and it's not something you can compel to happen. It's something you incentivize to happen. As people, by the way, I'll tell you this. Look, I spend typically somewhere around 25 or 30,000 on internet data every month. The average 52% of Lagosians earn between 50 and 70,000 a month. How do you expect them to spend money on good data to do electronic or internet banking? Now, that's even for Lagos. In other parts of Nigeria, in the south, in Bayelsa, in the southeast, in the north, west, and east, the numbers are more dire and stark.
Wow.
This is the reason why I think it's going to fail.
Well, I mean, didn't those who came up with this policy, didn't they factor all this in before deciding to go ahead with this?
Mr. Mefele and his team, I to be honest with you, I don't know what data they're looking at, if they're looking at the data all of us are looking at, but I'm sure he has the data. Him and his team, they have the real data on what is going on with the economy, and they see that the whole thing of saying that you're going to restrict cash withdrawals and take 1.2 million POS operators out of the banking system and kill fintech operators that have innovated around that space. It's wishful thinking. It's not going to happen. In fact, even the Association of POS operators, they wrote National Assembly and said that this policy is not going to work because it take us out of business. So I don't think you can imagine POS business has employed more than 1 million Nigerians. So you saying that you're going to kill the business, agency banking, that has really helped to bring more people into the system and decongest the banks. It's decongested the banks because you have today in Nigeria, you have about 4 ATMs and about over, I think, 107 POS per 100,000 Nigerians as we speak today. So, I just feel that this policy was not well thought through. It was rushed. And there are actually hidden motives behind the policy that are not known to Nigerians.
Okay, we have this message in from JP up on WhatsApp, who says, as always, thanks for your stellar insight, Kelvin. The CBN really didn't think this one through. I couldn't agree more on the failure, says JP. The governor of the central bank anywhere in the world would be answering real questions. All right, speaking about questions, Kelvin, quick question. This one, I've heard a lot of people say with absolute certainty, both in the finance sector and otherwise, just on the road, saying that this January 31st deadline is not going to hold. Do you think that first of all, that it's enough time for Nigerians to be able to transition and from their old notes into the new notes? And second of all, do you think that there is a possibility that it may be postponed?
I think it's going to be postponed because when the House National Assembly reconvenes on the 17th of January, they've been invited by both the Minister of Finance and the CBN has been invited by National Assembly to come and testify on the securitization of ways and means lending. And I think this is also, this issue of redesign and deadline are questions that are going to come up at the Senate, for them to defend how practicable that this whole by 31st of January is going to cease to become a legal tender. Because if you look at the UK, for example, they had a 24-month transition for phasing out the notes that had late Queen Elizabeth and bringing in the notes that have the new King Charles into the UK banking system.
2024
so for me, it's completely unrealistic to set a 90-day target, take about 2.7 trillion banknotes and change it. When 20 days into your deadline or 21 days into your deadline, you're yet to stop issuing out the old notes. People still go to the ATMs. I go to the ATM and I get the old notes. How do you plan to make it happen? It's not magic.
Yeah, because I have to say, I was like, okay, fine. You know what? You tell us to hurry up. I went and I put, well, no, I actually had notes because I'm cashless. But I was like, okay, fine. I don't have all my notes are in the bag. Give me the new notes.
Unavailable.
Nothing. Just more old notes.
Which is very, very ironic. I mean, you say one thing, but you're not putting enough things in place to actually go through with what you actually put in place.
I try not to be pessimistic, although I am pragmatic. But I will try and say, okay, you want to do this? Let's help you with your vision, and let's go ahead and do this. But I'm going to need the new notes in order for me to help you with your vision. Is all I'm saying. And I mean more than 1,000 naira notes that slips very quickly through my hands. That's all. Okay, very quickly, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to touch on the budget very quickly, Kelvin. So let's talk about this. Now, is Nigeria's debt the biggest takeaway from the budget for 2023?
In the 2023 budget, they intend to borrow $20 billion, about 8.8 trillion. But the budget actually has a 12.8 trillion naira deficit. Okay, and what is interesting is that if you look at the debt stock, if you look at the fact that the Fiscal Responsibility Act, sections 41, subsections 1A of 2007 says that the government cannot borrow to fund recurrent expenditure, both debt and non-debt expenditure, only capital expenditure and human development. It's there in the law. It's very, very clear and obvious. Nigerian government
are also not supposed to borrow from ways and means more than 5% of previous year's revenue. So it's
exactly. And that's been violated. Like the government has violated that from 272 billion naira, which was where Jonathan left it in 2015. It's violated that to 789 billion. It's violated that, and it's taking it up to 24.5 and 1 trillion naira. But if you look at the budget, you see that you have about 6.5 trillion naira in debt servicing. You have $20 billion the government wants to borrow. Bond yield spreads are somewhere around 18%. The country risk premium, I calculated myself, is somewhere around 16.2%. And that basically measures the risk of bringing money into Nigeria and the credit default swap rate. It helps you to calculate credit default swap, which is basically like the rate at which investors and traders expect that the Nigerian government will default on its bonds. Yeah, the equity risk premium is high. Funds are moving away from the bonds market into the fixed income market, because when the short-term interest on fixed income becomes higher than the prospects of the stock markets, capital moves away from unsecured, highly probable markets into more secured, risk-free, guaranteed markets. Yeah. So the numbers are not good. You basically have a budget that you're going to use to service debt, pay for PMS subsidy, and then fund scanty areas of your MDAs. That's what the budget's about.
Wow, Kelvin. Before we end the marketplace, give us one piece of good news. You have to do it,
something,
Kelvin.
anything. We'll take it.
And it can't be that laugh. People can't see. They can't see the laugh. They can hear it, but they need more. Give us one positive outlook for 2023. You have to.
Okay, maybe the positive outlook and what I think is going to improve the 2023 elections next month is the fact that the president signed the Electoral Act in 2022. That is going to change to some extent. I'm not too optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic that a lot of the things we've experienced with past elections will change a little bit. Maybe that's a little bit of a positive.
Thank you for that, and also for having to qualify the optimism by making it cautious.
Like I said,
But thank you, Kelvin.
We'll take it, like I said.
All right. So we've been chatting with Kelvin Emmanuel, who's the CEO of Dairy Hills Limited, and you can find him on Twitter at Real Kelvin 007, right? No, Real Kelvin 07. I always put the extra 0, but it's not there, people. Real Kelvin 07. You know what you were doing when you came up with that handle, Kelvin.
I think he does.
You did. But thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your take on obviously what's going on with that very, very sad incident and unnecessary, especially as we had heard so much about increased security on our railways, but then we still see these attacks and kidnappings happening. And so we're going to need more, especially if we want more investments in the country, if we want people to kind of stop coming into certain cities and making them like the clusters. We want to have more people spread out across the country, but we can only do that if we have a better transport network. And a network that people can trust. So
very true.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for giving us your take on that and on what's happening with the Naira redesign. We'll get back to you on January 31st. If it's been moved, well, Kelvin, we'll give you your flowers then. All right, have a wonderful evening.
All right, thanks a lot, Kelvin.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, on that note,